So the SaaS pricing model is fundamentally in trouble, but it's not the way most of the critics say, and we need to talk about it. I'm going to start by explaining how SaaS is typically priced for people who don't understand. Software as a service is priced like chicken. That's the joke, is that software as a service tastes like chicken to private equity firms because it's all the same and it's super consistent revenue, just like good white chicken meat. And the reason why that matters is because you want predictable revenue streams to build business valuations. And the reason why so much of tech pivoted to B2B SaaS in the 2010s is because fundamentally, if you have valuations that sticky because they're built on highly predictable business revenue, it's really easy to exit. It's a low risk play. It's easy to build a business, revolve it, turn it around, and sell it. And VCs love the low risk. And so they're happy to finance that all day because they see that exit to private equity. I've been in B2B SaaS companies that had access to private equity. I've seen it play out. It really is a, hey, this tastes like chicken. Let's roll it up. We have the same RevOps. We have the same billing model. We have similar pricing and packaging structures. We have internal operations we can make consistent. And we can just make this an extremely efficient machine that churns out high quality business revenue. That was the 2010s. That was the dream into the early 2020s, call it 2021. No longer the case as clearly. Few factors changing that we've talked about on this channel. Number one, AI is changing the pricing power dynamic. AI is giving companies that want to shift more pricing power to argue. Klarna publicly embarrassed Salesforce by moving off the Salesforce stack and building their own thing internally with AI. Now Klarna is going public, and you know what they're calling out? That they are now profitable to the tune of $180 million instead of like $43 million loss last year. And part of that is that they cleaned up their software stack and they're paying less in SaaS. This is what is enabling them to go for an IPO in very uncertain macroeconomic situation like we have right now. Other companies are going to pay attention to that. Other companies are going to notice that. And so that's piece one, is that like fundamentally SaaS is under pressure from AI. But piece two is that even if you have great distribution, even if you have great brand, arguably Salesforce has both of those things. Even if you lean aggressively into AI, again, Salesforce is also doing that. Salesforce is the original SaaS, so it's like a nice comp here. You are still in a situation where companies are going to change their expectations of you. So even if you keep the relationship, you're going to expect more custom work. So part of what's going on is that AI is enabling everyone to do more and everyone to expect more. And so when you're in a vendor relationship, you know internally that your teams are more efficient with AI, and you can push and expect more yeses from software vendors you're purchasing from, who will then use their teams to use AI to build customization that wouldn't have been profitable to build without AI 10 years ago. And if they don't do it, you're going to go down the street to an AI native company and they'll do it for you. And so we have this pressure for mass customization, which leads to it's workable, but it leads to a less efficient footprint for SaaS businesses. So that pressures their margins. The last thing I'll call out is that pricing and packaging is fundamentally changing. So SaaS has been priced per seat, per unit for a long time. Where you buy it, you have a setup fee. It's so much per seat. You price that out annually. You lock them into a 3-year contract or a 2-year contract, and off you go. And the margin on that is great because you're stamping out consistent software. Well, if your margins are under threat because the software is more custom, so you have to spend more maintaining it, even if you can do it because of AI, if you have more options to build it internally, so you have a lower cost of switching, and if the per seat pricing isn't attractive to you, you'll just walk. And so per seat pricing is something that's going to shift, especially if companies are going to start to launch AI native features as an attempt to keep customers, which everybody's doing. Come to us, we're AI native. Come to us, we have an AI feature. Every time I turn around and hit a web browser, I see an AI native feature for a B2B SaaS company. And that's great. But what it really means is that at the end of the day, I have to think about how you're pricing for me. If you're pricing AI native features and you have AI agents, are you going to charge per seat for AI agents? Are you going to charge per outcome the way Intercom does? How are you going to charge? And the B2B SaaS companies don't have good options here, because if you look at it, you go back to taste like chicken, everybody loves the annual contracts for software because they can be valued so efficiently. But if you're doing custom work, which we talked about, That's a service. That's not software. Can't value that as efficiently. It's not worth as much from a revenue perspective. And that's increasing in the mix. If you are pricing out agents and you're pricing per outcome, that's also not software. It's not as high a quality revenue source. And if you are trying to do neither of those things and you're trying to just price flat, you can, but then you're vulnerable to people who are undercutting you, which has always been the case, but it's especially the case now with AI. And so SaaS companies sort of have they're in a hard spot. Like they probably need to adjust pricing because AI is putting downward pressure on margins. They probably need to make pricing more outcome driven because if they don't, someone else in their sector will. But if you make it more outcome driven, you decrease the quality of that revenue from a valuation perspective. And now SaaS doesn't taste like chicken anymore. Now SaaS is different. It's hard to value. There's distinct revenue models. There's different pricing strategies. It's not as attractive for exits. And if it's not as attractive for exits, the entire value chain for SaaS starts to get cracks in it. The value of funding a SaaS is less now, not necessarily because the individual company can't be successful, not even because it can't be profitable, but because at the end of the day, the whole model for how software as a service works is not as consistent. And the industry loves consistency. Finance guys love consistency, and it's just not as consistent anymore. And we're going to see great SaaS companies. We're going to see disruptive, amazing SaaS companies in this cycle. But they are going to be innovative across a wider range of dimensions than we're used to, including pricing. And if they do that successfully, even if they do very, very well, they're going to find that the purchase and exit pattern is different than the standard SaaS exit. The valuation is going to be different than the standard SaaS exit. And that is a new thing. That is not something that we've seen before. We have not yet seen a model of a SaaS exit to IPO for an AI-driven company, and we probably won't for a few years. In fact, one of the things that's interesting is that AI is enabling companies to get profitable and stay private for longer. And so as much as we talk about Klarna using AI to go public, we might find that that is a little bit of an edge case and that more companies are going to look like Stripe, where Stripe has gone through the alphabet soup of funding rounds and are publicly saying that there's a real chance that they never, ever, ever go public and they just provide liquidity in the secondaries to their employees and they run a massive private corporation. And why go public? Well, in a sense, Stripe has sort of broken the model there. Like if you're processing over $1 trillion in payments, the world expects you to be a public company. And so the fact that AI might enable such an efficient team and an efficient profitability model for an individual company that like, if they do a great job, if they get the pricing right, if they figure out like outcome pricing and a mix of agent pricing and per seat pricing and everything works out. And by the way, I know Stripe is not a SaaS, but in this case, it's a great counterpoint to Klarna. So that's why I brought it in. But if you figure all that out and you end up being very profitable, what's your incentive to go public? We now have a beaten path with Stripe and others of just staying private. And that in turn is not encouraging VCs to fund either. And so part of what I'm calling out with all of this is that you need to understand that when something as fundamental as B2B SaaS shows cracks in the revenue model and shows cracks in the pricing model and shows cracks in ultimately the value chain, it doesn't matter if individual companies can thrive. They will. It doesn't matter if companies can adapt, they will. The fact that the standard is changing means that there is less opportunity on the table because there is less commoditization in the software space. Disruption is happening, and that's AI-driven disruption. So that goes for SaaS, it goes for pricing, it goes for packaging. We're all living through it. I don't have a silver bullet answer for how you price correctly. There's problems with per seat because there's pressure on agents. There's problem with outcome pricing because how do you determine outcomes and how do you get it right? It sounds attractive, but it probably has lower margins and it's less valuable. There's problems with custom software and like customization and service revenue. There's not an easy answer here. And I have confidence that great businesses are going to figure this out, but it's going to be really interesting to see how they do. So there you go. SaaS is changing, and that is changing everything along with it.